We're going to go through the topics for today will be performance and humor. And we'll talk a little bit about this, just because it's definitely a part of the training, kind of part of like here. It's a little bit of there's definitely a performance element to it. Enjoying work while making a living. The balance of these two. Idea of future and bliss postponement in our culture, which is related to yoga in a lot of ways, a lot of different ways. Talk about that. And then practice, which is practicum just means practice. The last week we did The Art of Learning. And we talked a little bit about that. Did you guys read the book?
I did.
I'm still reading
You're
it.
still reading it? And did you read it?
Yeah, I'm just at the tail end of it. I love it.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, I love his concepts. It's a little repetitive based on his stories, but I really love the concept of it. And I love his personal journey is really it's an amazing story, an amazing journey that he's
it is. It's pretty cool. Like, it is repetitive because also, one of the reasons I think that that particular book is repetitive is because that's kind of what that book is about. It's the art of learning, and repetition is such a huge part of that. Anytime when if somebody asks me like, can I do, there's a weekend teacher training course. It's 7 days or whatever, 5 days or whatever it is. What do I think? And I say, well, unless you're in a machine and you can practice the set for the whole 48 hours straight, then I wouldn't do it because it doesn't give you enough repetition. You need those breaks in between to do to repeat and to digest and stuff. So it makes sense that was, he's repeating himself a lot.
Yeah.
Because also, learning processes are very basic, really. Like how he wrote a whole book about that is surprising to me.
I think what I took away most importantly was what he said about waiting. That right there is such a mind-blowing concept because we are not taught as human beings to wait. Like, we have no discipline for waiting. For that, we get anxiety, we get anxious, we look for other things. And he says that's where the magic is. That's the discipline, is waiting. Using that time to fine-tune yourself as a human being, mentally and spiritually, and just breathing and waiting. Not just falling into the next thing. That was really the most interesting takeaway for me in the book so far.
Yeah, having the discipline of patience.
Yeah.
And the ability to digest. That's why I always, I understand the desire to, to do a course and then in one day or, whatever you feel like, I did a 5-hour course to become, whatever, let's say a hairstylist or something. And even, I understand that, but it's,
What are you talking about, Steve? When I went to hairdressing school, it took 2 years and 1,600 hours and 100 perms.
Right. That's how it is.
It was a long time, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's not a reality.
Yeah.
Although it would be nice if I wanted to be a hairstylist, it would be probably more appealing to me to be able to do it in one day.
Yeah.
But it's not at all a reality. And same thing with yoga and same thing with most things.
I know it's funny to me that I'm it was repetitive. I'm I could have gotten through that book much faster. But it was funny because while I'm reading it, you were talking in class yesterday about patience and what do we rush through in our lives, not just moving into supine twists, and it was I'm trying to rush through life. I realized I just want to be like a Mario brother and get right to the end. Just to see what it's like, just do. But yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit in that. I'll talk about that in the postponement of bliss thing. part of the class as well. But yeah, like
But
if
that
you're
was
always,
great reading. I love
if you're
it.
always trying to like finish, you know, like
Yeah.
I have to finish this, and then I'm going to finish that, and then I'm going to finish this. At some point, you know, you have to realize that it's this whole journey of study, and even the journey of doing my teacher trainings. Like, look how fast this went by.
I know.
It's like we blinked our eyes, and like, you know, we're already at the 8th week, and it wasn't even, you know, this is longer. This is actually, it used to be 8 weeks. Now it's 10 weeks, you know, so like, this is longer than it used to be. This used to be the end of class. You would do your final and then you were done, you know, although, not really, there's more, but, you know, it's the processes. And I think also, you know, part of that, the trap of getting stuck with this idea that, you know, like the belts. I don't know if you talked about, I don't remember if you talked about belts, like black belts, being a black belt. That's the big thing with martial arts. And, you know, like you think like, oh, when you get a black belt, that's like the end, that's the culmination of all your training. But in fact, that's just like, you're just a first degree black belt. Like there's other degrees too, like that continues on, you know, and then you become a teacher, and then that has different levels to it as well. And it just keeps going on, you know. But what would be like your biggest takeaway, like one takeaway from the book so far?
I think that was, for me, was the waiting, like the patience and, you know, and the breathing too. He also talked about when you're feeling really impatient or really distracted, how important it is to actually put something down and take a breath or step away from something that you're overthinking. And even in his chess game, he had to do that all the time because he had to deal with all of the senses around that with his opponent sitting right there, which were his opponent is waiting for him to move, but he has 36 pieces to process. And then he has all that, you know, the self-talk about, will I make the right move? Will I not make the right move? What's the next move? Now he wants me to move. And it's just shutting all of that out to be able to pull back and take a breath and then go into it clear-minded, you know? Just like, it's amazing the power of a single breath, what it can do for you.
And it's so easy to forget. It's so fleeting.
True, very
It's so
true.
easy to get caught up in whatever it is. I think that's really the bigger gift of teaching yoga, is that you are innately sort of, I don't want to say forced, but that's what comes to mind. You're pushed into the practice on a daily basis, you know, and it makes you like really practice because you're teaching it all the time. So like it becomes more part of your daily life, you know, versus, and really being able to spot insanity, like levels of insanity that people get into when they're shopping, you know. I mean, I see it all, I'm sure we've all seen it. Driving, like that's a big one, you know. The other day I was taking my daughter to school, and a woman literally drove on the wrong side of the road just to get a few feet ahead, you know, like 10 cars ahead of the rest. But she was like in a head-on collision with me because I only had one road. I didn't have any place to go, you know. And it was totally, literally insanity. Like, you know, it's, what did she save? Maybe, even if she did save, which I don't think she did, a minute, she put her life and the endangerment of my life and my daughter's life and everything else for that. I think she might have saved 10 seconds, or maybe not even that, because I've been watching and seeing, like, when you wait as a driver, like, you could try this too, since you're all in LA. Do you drive, Suki? So you all drive, right? So try this as an experiment on the topic of Josh Waitzkin and waiting. Try like one drive out of the day where you don't, like you just totally don't attach to the time. Like you just let someone go or whatever. You stay in one lane, for instance. Let's say you're going from Sunset in Fairfax 2 miles, okay? Stay in one lane. Like don't try to dodge and cut and, you know, do all the maneuvering. You'll see that people will dodge, cut, and maneuver all around you. And that same person, if you just stay in your lane, you end up often passing that one person. Like I've been doing this week specifically because that one woman like literally drove. It was a 2-lane. I had one lane and one lane going east, one lane going west, and there wasn't room. Like if I had stepped on the gas, and said, okay, I'm going for this. I need the money or whatever. I'm going to collect insurance or whatever. If I had done that, which people are crazy enough to do that sometimes. Like when they're driving, if you get two people that are in a temporary state like that, someone could. So try that and see, because I know for a fact that had I been one of the other people in the direction that the woman was going, if I just stayed in my lane and then we were going to the same location, I might have even passed her, because it happens all the time. The last time I did this was taking my daughter to school a different day, Wednesday I think it was, and a guy was speeding and honking and cutting, and I ended up passing him. I stayed in the same lane. So the ability to stop and slow down, and though it's not necessary in everything, obviously, but in these scenarios is going to give you a lot of survival skills, I think, and even the avoidance. I mean, literally the avoidance could save your life at times, So that one, did you read some of the book?
Mm-hmm.
So what was your takeaway so far?
I think so far, just I think his process of sort of rediscovering his own motivation towards bettering himself, just kind of the acknowledgement of it's not always easy, and in the immediate, it's not always what you want to be doing, but then it's from a more bird's eye point of view, all of that, and just renewing your own motivation is really valuable, and then you can have kind of new perspectives on it.
Yeah. And do you have any? No, you didn't read it.
I need to read it.
Okay.
Travel.
All right.
I will read it.
You can audiobook it too. When I got it, it wasn't on audio yet. But the audiobook's even better in some ways because it's by him.
Yeah, he reads it.
He
That's
reads
what I
it,
did.
which is good because it makes a big difference when the author actually reads the book versus, just some other person. Because there's the voice inflection. There's more power to it, I think. Suki, did you read the?
Yes.
You did? Okay, good.
I especially liked whenever he would face a challenge or whenever he quote unquote fails something, he does the same thing over and over again to overcome his own weakness. And I really related to that because I myself also need to do the same thing over and over again in order to become better, improve as a person. Whether it's a skill, an attribute, I need to do it over and over again in order it's okay to acknowledge a mistake or a failure and learn to redo and learn to kind of embrace and do it over.
Yeah.
That was a big thing when I was reading.
Yeah, that every single little failure it gives you a little bit of a tell of which he talks about the tell. I don't know if you guys got to that point where he's talking about the tell, which is whatever it was, it was the turning of your foot just so, which is what allowed the opening for the opponent to come in and jab him or whatever. I'm not that familiar with push hands. I think it's kind of like a version of sumo wrestling, sort of. I think it's along those lines. And you're trying to unweight and push the person out of bounds. But it's it's a slightly different version of that. And so the people that run away, there was one opponent that would never battle with him again. Remember, there was that one guy who was no, and he would never. He was no, I'm not battling him. I'm not fighting you again. And he was really disappointed because he was, he knows that's what would make him a champion, right? This is a double champion that's written a book, so he knows how to be a champion. if that's what you're into, right? And so when he says, oh, this is really sad that this guy won't push hands with me again because he lost to me once,
Yeah.
one time, then what does that say about him? Then that's not a healthy way to be. It means his ego was hurt. His ego was crushed. And because his ego got crushed, it stunted his growth. And that's where the ego can be. A weak sense of self and the ego can be very detrimental. Is when you can't take, you can't take a loss. You can't take it on the chin, so to speak. Some of your greatest strength in life will be your ability to be able to take the pain of whatever it is, because the ability to take that pain of loss will then make you have the ability for all the other things in life. And in a lot of ways, yoga poses can be really challenging in that way. Like, how many of you have done a pose? Like for me, I swear I did handstand. I'm not exaggerating. I did it for 6 years to learn handstand. It took me 6 years. I'm not saying that I didn't do it every day for 6 years, but I did it on a regular basis. It was very elusive. But every single one of those attempts that I lost, so to speak, added up and became my ability to win or do handstand. Not saying that that's like a winning or losing, but it didn't, and you get to the point where, like these masters, like this guy, Josh Waitzkin, is a master, and he talks a lot about failure and about like overcoming fear, and yoga teachers have to be able to do that, which for whatever reason is just part of life. Some people aren't going to like you. It's another one. Like, they just won't. Doesn't matter what you're saying. Like, you go and you preach love and whatever, equanimity and all these good, healthy things, and you'll get some, anti-person that's like against everything, that's, really loves to hate. So don't let that stuff stop. You can't let it stop you from being an author or being a teacher or whatever it is. Like for years, I know some of my friends never wanted to post anything online. And I'd say, why? They're like, because there's always, somebody, on the other side that's gonna, they're gonna have comments, or they do and they don't allow comments. Now I'll admit, I don't allow comments on my kids' videos, but that's for a different reason. That's for my kids. They're not grown up. They're not, I don't allow comments because there's some weird comments that come up with children's videos. But I definitely do like post stuff just publicly, and don't be upset if whatever Cucumber Face 591 didn't approve of your statements or whatever, So. All right, so that covers last week. We're going to go into, so this week we're going to start getting heavier into practice. The class does kind of lighten up a little bit as far as the amount of lecture and stuff goes, which is probably good. I'm sure you guys are, some of the lecture I do have to cover because there are some topics that I want to cover that are very important actually. So today, like I was saying, it's performance and humor. So we're going to start kind of going through some of these. Performance and humor in a yoga class. So now this one is a choice. I mean, like a lot of this, I don't think that there is a right or wrong when it comes to teaching yoga. I think you can joke about stuff. I think you can showboat if you want to, like display really crazy poses in the beginning of class if you want to. I think you can, you can wear really revealing clothing. If you want to, you can walk into class on your hands and do like a whole performance routine as you come in. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It will all depend on your audience. In the end, your audience will choose to either put up with your shenanigans or not, or they'll either like it or they won't. And I do think that that's a good way to teach if you're going to be in this for long term. If you're going to just play it safe and you just want to like have like kind of mediocre experiential classes, that's fine. Like you can play it really safe and just teach like a standard, you know, class, not rock any boats. And a lot of people do that. I personally don't, and I have at times. I do like to joke about a little bit, like some of you. Today I didn't really joke that much, but there's usually like a little joke here and there, or maybe 2 or 3 in the class, because it gets really intense, and you know, people get really, I don't know, tense actually is the best word to put it. They get tense, and so I want to break up some of the tension by joking a little bit, or they get nervous around the teacher or whatever, because it's like a group environment and the teacher's there and they get nervous. Like you'll feel it sometimes. You probably are feeling it if you've done the shadowing. Have you ever noticed that sort of you start walking by and they start stiffening up, like they start, you know, the arm suddenly gets stiff. They, you know, and that's okay. I mean, I do think that the teacher-student relationship, that's normal, but you can lighten that a little bit sometimes. I do think it's healthy. The other thing that's really important with having some performance and humor in the class is that it's not only for the students, it's also for you as a person, as a teacher. That if you enjoy that, make your classes enjoyable. As long as you are conveying the message of whatever you're saying. Let's say like, if not everyone knows what triangle pose is, you shouldn't be cracking a joke and going, okay, next in the series, and like somebody who's new doesn't know what triangle pose is, everyone else knows that it's triangle, you should still say, at the very least, next pose is triangle. You know, lunge your right foot forward. So at least you gave the instruction, right? So the balance of humor in the class, you still need to cover the fundamentals of the class. Okay, so put in the instruction and accompany it, color it up with performance and humor. Okay, performance, the difference between performance and humor could be, like for instance, the gong. I could put on just flute music, but the gong is live. That's a live performance of the gong. Another one would be, I could have only my students displaying the hard poses, but I'll display like a handstand so that my students can see what I'm doing, and it's a performance qualifier. That's what that is. It shows that I can do the pose too, and that I've done it, and that they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I've done at least a version of those poses. There are certain poses that I'm starting to lose some of my flexibility in. Like I won't do pike to handstand anymore. Because at about 40 years old or something, I tore my rotator cuff. And now when I try to do like a press from pike legs through to handstand, it just killed my shoulder. So I won't perform that maneuver anymore. Because it's detrimental to I'll pay the price for like a week probably now. I don't even know because I haven't done it in so long. So with your performance, I do think that there are some yoga teachers that are really against performance, like performing hard poses and showing people at the front of the room. They're like, you know, whatever, they kind of hate on that. And my attitude towards that is, fine, don't display any poses then. Just dial it in from, you know, just channel it in from elsewhere, and that's fine. That's your style. I think that having the qualifiers at least is good. How many of you have done a video? Like the other day I was watching a video, and the person who was displaying the video didn't have mastery over the poses. Now yoga is a movement art. The yoga we do, it is a physical fitness, like a martial arts, kind of, right? I mean, it is let's say, at the very least, it's a movement expression art form, right? Yoga. I'm talking about the physical yoga posture vinyasa stuff. And I was doing a video, and I was watching the video, and there were a bunch of haters. I was like, why is there all these? So I looked at the comments, and I went, okay, I'm going to go and look at the video now. So, because I just saw all these like negative, I saw a bunch of thumbs down on this one. then I watched it. I couldn't even get through it because the form. And again, like, I'm not saying that I'm the master of form at all. I'm just saying that if you're going to do a video, then you should know that the forms that you're displaying. And when a teacher has really bad form, like the comments were like that. They said, I really question her abilities as a teacher because all of her poses have really weak form. And in watching the video, her performance was like, out of 10, it was a 3 or something. Maybe even a 2. Like, it was really low. You could see that she didn't know the practice. And I'm saying from a very loose, I'm not a really like judgmental teacher. Like, that's why I wanted to see the video. I was like, why is there so many thumbs down? But it did make me feel like I did not want to practice with this person. I just felt very strongly like I cannot do this video. There are a lot now. I don't think it was as bad like way back in the 90s. You have to really be into yoga to teach yoga in the 90s because there wasn't a lot of money in it. But now there's a bunch of money in it. So there's a lot of people that have very little to no mastery of the poses that are even doing teacher trainings and such. And so I do think that that becomes important. That every now and then you should display a pose. You don't have to do it every class, but the hard poses or some of the variations of the poses, it builds motivation and trust in the students that you can do the poses as well. So, especially if you're like young and flexible and like your body can do all these poses, it is a movement form and it will boost, it will motivate your students to do the practice. And motivation is good, you know. That's also why, like tomorrow, actually, I had to cut one of my classes because I was teaching too many public classes. I had to cut one of them. So I was teaching 2 and then 2 back to back. And it was too much. Like I could feel, you know, you can feel when it's too much. There is a load. You could teach somewhere around 20, maybe 25 classes a week. That's about your max. Okay, just know that, because even for me, and I have an endurance to teach because I've been doing it so long. For me, when I hit about 20, somewhere around 20 to 22 classes, I start to max out. And I find that I don't want to display as much. There is like this limit, and you can feel it. Like I could probably make a list of what the markers would be. I haven't done that particular list. I've done a bunch of them, but I haven't done that list. But I could make a list of like, are you sore, 90% of the day? Are you having trouble, getting up from your nap after your 3rd class to go and teach your 4th class? Are you, do you find yourself, lethargic the rest of the day? Do you find yourself needing 14 hours of sleep at least once a week? Things like that. Those are the questions to start asking yourself. Are you finding yourself looking for alternative forms of energy? Energy drinks, caffeine. Are you overdosing on sugar? Are you, how many of you, I could tell some of you like, yeah. Are you, right? Do you find yourself, right, like for instance, like with me, one of my markers is overdose of caffeine. I start overdosing caffeine because I'm like, I gotta perform. I've got a 5th class today. But I don't feel that energy to teach that 5th class. But I need the energy to have that 5th. Okay, forget it. Where's the Red Bull or whatever it is? I don't do Red Bull, but I'm just saying, I'm making a point. I'll do like whatever, coffee or a soda or something. You just give me that last little, that jump. And that's when I know, okay, I'm overdoing this. I've reached a tolerance level. And now I'm starting to, at the expense of my own well-being, I'm taking in substances. Nothing major, but caffeine is a drug. Caffeine's a drug. If you're, look, 2 coffees a day or 2 teas a day or whatever, maybe even 3 is fine. But 7 is not, right? Do you agree? 7 coffees is a little extreme. because it's one before the meal and one after every meal. That's a lot of caffeine, right? And eventually you could pay the price. There could be some backlash with that. The sugar obviously is hard on your, like your kidneys, and your insulin levels will be taxed. Like your body's gonna like start producing a lot of insulin. The caffeine, I'm not sure what the byproduct of caffeine overdose
Cortisol.
is, but
I've had a caffeine overdose.
Yeah?
When I was
Me
in
too.
college.
oh, so what was it?
So
In college.
actually, mine was from
Yeah.
green tea, which has a lot of
Yes.
caffeine in it.
It does.
And it was like an innocent mistake. Basically, like I was in a play, and it was like opening. Like I think it was like this happened on like a Wednesday night or something. It was like dress rehearsal because we were having our first show on Thursday, and I lost my voice. Like it was musical theater. So I just couldn't. They were like, just be on vocal rest, like because I was like so upset. And just be on vocal rest and just drink like tea and hot water, like, so I just had only been having green, but I like didn't even realize the caffeine level in it, and then also just like the sheer amount of green tea that I had. And so like, it was like this really weird thing where like, I got like super jittery, like my body started to, like I was like shaking, and then I like kind of like blacked out, like I kind of like collapsed, like it was like this weird thing, and then like the student like emergency services team had to like give me an IV, and like yeah, but it's like
Right.
it's crazy just like how it can just like sneak up on you.
Yeah, so be careful. I mean, that's the thing. Like as teachers, this because performance takes on a lot of different layers. It's also teacher performance. So it's also like, like performing on stage. I mean, I had to stop singing in a band because I had to make a decision. Do I want to sing or do I want to teach? For me, I'm not saying for you guys, but I teach full time. Like I teach a full load of classes. I don't know what my average is this week, but I mean, it's somewhere around 4 a day, probably. So 20. And I do teach 6 days a week. So it's probably more like, let's just say it's 21, 22, somewhere around there. So I'm right at the threshold of it. And I did find myself starting to sort of spinning out, where I was like, what about Red Bull? What about 5-hour energy? Or what about, and I was like, how about, sub out one of your classes tomorrow and regroup and like figure out, do you really need that 5th class that day? And then also what's funny too with being able to perform as a teacher, when I get really busy, I start getting more busy. Like I start all of a sudden, like a whole other client, like another client just called me, and then they want, to have me do privates for like another company and do a corporate thing. That's what I am going to do, but it's like, there's a corporate event that they want me to give a lecture about meditation on. And imagine like this for yoga teachers, like where you get so busy that your ability to perform starts getting to the level where you start wanting to take in caffeine and other substances, let's say Red Bull. I don't know what's in Red Bull, but whatever it is. But that was like where my mind was going. Huh?
It's like pure caffeine and some kind of
And like
toxic-
toluene or something.
Taurine.
Taurine, yeah.
I'm sure processed sugars are in there, right? There's gotta be
Oh yeah, there's
sugar
sugar in there, for sure. There's definitely sugar, for
So,
sure.
I just know those two.
Okay, so keeping that at bay. And also not overperforming in your classes. When I do poses, I try to stick to one class per day where like if I teach a private, I'll do one private with that person. So like I'll do the poses, the up dogs, the down dogs, I'll do 90% of that private. And then the rest of the day, I don't. So like all the rest of the classes, it's like really a hard pose, I'll jump in, or like no one could do a certain pose. Like the poses that I find that are the difficult ones are like, like this, like this one. Like no one can do this one for some reason. Or not no one, but like a lot of classes, no one in that class would be able to do it without showing them the pose. So unless I have somebody in there that can do it, I'll be like, okay, Suki will display Ashtavakrasana or something. But otherwise, I'll just display the one hard pose. That's fine. doing a one-word pose qualifies you as a teacher. It doesn't tax your body that much to do one pose per class. At least one, you know? Do one good one, and that's it. And then you're done with the qualification, right? I don't know if you guys will need to later on. It's up to you, but in the beginning of teaching, you kind of, I think you have to qualify more. Like you have to show that I can do this pose too, you know, like, or whatever it is, or a variation of it. I'll never do standing splits because my body's not built for it. But I can definitely like hold my version of standing L splits, but it looks more like an L. I'm trying to think of the other aspect of it. It should be a little, I do think you should have a little entertainment in your class, some kind of entertainment value, because they could go and just turn on a video or something, or read a book. Like you could put a book down of yoga poses and just do yoga to that. If they're paying for the class, you should give some kind of, I don't know, some food for thought. Paint it up with some meditation, or some words of wisdom, or some poetry, or you could even read poetry. Like it doesn't have to be your poems. It could be like Rumi. There's this amazing quote by Rumi today about love the one you're with, or something, and then expand on that in class. Expand your heart center. Feel the love that you have for your practice. Now feel the love you have for your partner. Think of one thing that you're going to do to express and show without attachment to receiving, that you're going to show gratitude for your partner. Think of one thing.
I have a girlfriend that does tarot cards, like with her session, like private yoga.
Okay.
sessions,
Yeah.
Kind
So
of
that's-
reminds me of like you.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
like-
they have like little scriptures and stuff. in there.
Yeah, so you can throw that in, you can throw in, there's so many different things you can do. I tend to quote from